from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to the program, Wednesday night edition of our show. Happy to be here. 833-482-5337 is the phone number, 833-4-VALDEZ. And a couple of headlines I want to get into. A lot going on here, really a lot. And I probably say that every day, but and I mean it every day, but today there really is a lot. There was a U.S. strike in Syria that killed a senior ISIS official. I didn't even know we were conducting strikes in Syria. So we'll get into that. And maybe tomorrow or soon we can get one of our astute generals on to talk about that because I love to get their perspective on these things. Let me see what else we've got. The 911 service in Massachusetts went out. Go figure. They're blaming it on a firewall. The pilots union says they're going to eliminate the use of terms like cockpit and manpower in the name of equity. Ay, bendito. We'll get into that one maybe in hour number 3, so you got to stick around for that one. Portland Pickles become the first sports team to legally sell marijuana products at their games. I didn't even know there was a team called the Portland Pickles, but now you can get your local marijuana product. Gummies, baggies, whatever. You can get it at the game. I wonder if that's going to do anything to help things in Portland. Because, man, there's a lot going on in Portland, and I don't know if this helps. Let's see. What else we got here? And there's some new developments on the horrific rape story that came out of New York City of a 13-year-old girl. We'll get to that in a little bit. But right now, I want to recap a little bit of what happened yesterday in Racine, Wisconsin. We're on a bunch of stations in Wisconsin. Big shout out to Wisconsin. And El Trompito held a rally in Wisconsin yesterday, and he had a lot to say. We have several clips, but I want to get to this one right here because I think it's on trend, right? It's on trend with what we've been seeing. It's a very apt thing to talk about. Listen to this.
Joe Biden is humiliating our country on the world stage. He's actually humiliating us. You saw what happened this weekend. It's turning the United States into a total joke all over the world. First, he wandered off the G7 in Europe, the stage. He looked like he didn't know where the hell he was, but he didn't know where he was. He's blaming it now on AI. He's saying he doesn't know what AI is, but that's okay. Now they're saying the media is manipulating. Oh, he's saying the media is manipulating. Now, on that one, I have to stick up for the media, I have to tell you. He said the media is manipulating the pictures of him constantly not knowing where the hell he is. They're doing just the opposite. They're making him look better. At the G7 in Europe, and he had to be rescued by other world leaders. They had to pull him back. Then he bizarrely put his face on the Pope's forehead. What was that all about? That was weird.
That was weird. Now, this is again, we've been seeing this, right? Since Friday, I've been talking about this on the appearances I've done on Newsmax. I talked about it on the radio. And what I find interesting here is this is not something new, but it's something more frequent, right? So when you start seeing something more frequently that doesn't favor Biden, you have to ask yourself, what's the impetus here? Who's pushing this? Is this really the media being concerned and curious and saying, oh my gosh, this guy's running for president again, he doesn't really know where he's going, he's shaking hands with the Easter Bunny isn't there, he's lost? Or are we exacerbating these stories to make him look bad? Now, who would do such a thing? Well, of course, those that want to get rid of Joe Biden and can't do it the right way, right? The right way would be for Kamala Harris to say, you know, my fellow Americans, this is really bad, but Joe Biden's got to go. Yeah, I love Joe, but he's got to go. And, of course, I think some people would respect her for saying that. But she won't do it. Mayorkas won't do it. None of the cabinet members will do it. So oftentimes in politics, people have mentors. There are power brokers that are behind the scenes. I know in the case of Joe Biden, because he's been around for so long, people tend to find mystery or even mysticism, if you will, with the idea that the president that he served under, Barack Obama, somehow being an influence in his decision making in his own administration, right? So people oftentimes say it's Obama really pulling the strings. Well, perhaps on some issues. I'm pretty sure Biden's his own man for some things, or whoever is part of the power struggle for Biden, whether it's his son, his aides, his wife. I would suspect it's a combination thereof, right? I would suspect that Jill Biden has her own motivations, and Obama says, hey, you know who's really good at being a chief of staff? Pick this guy. You know who's really good for comms? Pick that guy. You know who's really great at foreign policy? Pick this guy. And I think Joe probably picks some of them, and others he may not. And that's how he exerts some of his influence. I'm pretty sure he gives some direct advice, like, now here's what we're going to do, Joe. And, I'm sure there's a lot of that going on. And I'm pretty confident when I think of what we've been seeing with Joe Biden being lost here and being lost there and going this way and going stage left when everybody's going stage right, and just all of these things for months now. Really for years, but a lot more in the last several months. It doesn't surprise me that when Obama had to help guide him off the stage when he was a little frozen, that he may have given him a pep talk, right? A pep talk, something like, now, Joe, now you've been messing up. We love you. But you might want to consider letting somebody come in, maybe Wes Moore, the governor, maybe somebody else. But you got to put some thought into it. And him going, well, no, and you ain't black, and some crazy conversation as they were, walking off the stage. He had his hand somewhat gently and gingerly around the shoulder of Joe Biden. Who knows what that conversation was like? I would suspect it's something like that. And again, on Monday, we had Charlie Kirk on, right? And Charlie Kirk referenced an article by Charles Spearing. Charlie Spearing is a political writer. He's been in D.C. for a long time. And he wrote a piece in the Daily Mail. And a lot of people talking about this piece since Monday, because the references that Charlie Spearing put in the article are that the Democrats are actively trying to get Joe not to run. And I think I've suspected that, and we've talked about it every time there was a negative article about him, right? The media always provided cover for Biden until they didn't, which would mean that, maybe again, Barack Obama saying things like, call Joy Reid, call this one, let's have them cover, but not cover that much, and make sure that they start to hit him a little bit so he can get the hint. Now, maybe there's going to be more of a power struggle, but the article suggests that it's Obama and Clinton and Schumer and Pelosi, and that this group of four are willing to create a united front to push Biden out. Now, it's pretty good conjecture, right? And it's a well-sourced article and whatnot. And it makes all the sense in the world to me. I'm pretty sure there's always a power struggle going on, right? We saw a power struggle with Kevin McCarthy to be moved. We see it go back and forth with Johnson. We've seen it going on with Bob Good. You see, people have political animosity towards certain people, and they run people against them, and that is the nature of politics. And it's up to Biden to say, well, I don't want to go. I'm president. I'm this and I'm that. So ultimately, I bring that up to say how that conversation went, right? I'm wondering, what did it look like? Was that the way it went down? Are the Democrats trying to push him out? I would say yes, of course. It makes all the sense in the world that some faction of them is trying to get him out of there. I think the bigger question is, will it work? Will it work? And do they, say, all right, look, we're never going to get a candidate in, so let's push the person we want to run next time, 2028, and start cutting deals with the Republicans? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. But interesting things to keep your eye on with respect to the tea leaves. So we'll get into that a little bit more, and I want to get your take on that as well as we get into calls a little bit later on, maybe in about 25, 30 minutes, maybe around 10:50 or so. We'll hit the phones. The phone number is 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. But first, it's Juneteenth. Now, a lot of people don't even know what Juneteenth is, and they think it's some sort of woke holiday. It's not. Literally commemorated, I think the first Juneteenth was Abraham Lincoln, right? But not a woke person. But Juneteenth has a different meaning to one of my former colleagues in New York Talk Radio. And it was because this guy got shot up like Swiss cheese by the mob on Juneteenth some 3 decades ago. And he once told me this story, and it was one of the most fascinating conversations I've ever had. And I want to have that same conversation again with you all. So make sure you tune in. Don't go anywhere. It's about to get live in here. 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Mr. Call Screener, who is a budding radio star, by the way. Richie Valdez is terrific.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. And it's Juneteenth. Juneteenth in 2024 means one thing, but Juneteenth back in 1992 was a different story. Back when the Gambino crime family was still a very big deal. John Gotti was the head of the Gambinos in New York City, and he had a critic, right? He had a critic that happened to be in the streets and on the air. This critic is none other than my buddy Curtis Sliwa, who's the founder of the Guardian Angels. And Curtis was critical of Gotti and what happened, with respect to the crime that was going on during the Dinkins administration. Crime was rampant in New York City, and the Gottis didn't like what Curtis had to say, and they took some action. Now, I'm not going to steal his thunder, although I could tell you it ends up with a little bit of Swiss cheese on behalf of Curtis Sliwa. Let's welcome him into the show. Curtis Sliwa, welcome back, sir.
Remember, my liberty-loving Latino buddy, it's Parmesan cheese for this discussion.
Because you're healed now. Now, Curtis Sliwa, I remember sitting down with you on many occasions talking about this sporadically. But one time, I don't know, had to be 3 or 4 years ago now, where we did a podcast, This is America, and we did the entire story, soup to nuts, of you getting shot. All the way into every detail, including your cousin, the Cheech from Howard Beach, right? And I want to get into as much of that as I can, because this really is a fascinating story. And I think it took New York City by storm when the radio stations and the news channels were all reporting that New York City vigilante, the head of the Guardian Angels Safety Patrol, and again, you've wrongly been accused of being a vigilante many times, including a Netflix film by the title Vigilante, which you're in. And I have to say, it was a shocking moment for us to see that, and more shocking that you're alive. But let's take it from the top. Curtis Sliwa.
It's the power of radio, Rich. I was broadcasting at WABC in the mornings, and John Gotti Sr., the head of organized crime, was on trial for the last time. Because now finally the government had his underboss, Sammy the Bull Gravano, who had taken the vow to testify against him, and he followed through. His testimony was damning. Even more damning was Memorex tapes that had been taken of conversations between John Gotti Sr. and Sammy the Bull Gravano, in which he was ordering the execution of people who either didn't pay a vig on gambling debts or hadn't produced the required money in order to remain a member of the Gambino crime family. It was ruthless. And a jury of 12 found John Gotti Sr. guilty of 32 different racketeering charges involving RICO conspiracy, and he was sent to Marion Prison, federal prison in Illinois, triple life without parole, where he eventually died. Now, in the interim, as he was on trial, they give you an AM radio to listen to when you're in your cell. And he would hear me ranting and raving about the activities of the Gambino crime family that I knew well because I had grown up with them. And he had summoned his underboss, who replaced Sammy the Bull Gravano, who happened to be his son, John Gotti Jr. And in a jailhouse meeting, he said, look, you better silence that guy. Do whatever you got to do to shut him up. I don't want to hear him talking about our family any longer or this thing of ours. And so the first attack against me in April of 1992 was with baseball bats. They tooled me up, but it didn't stop me from talking about the Gambino crime family on the radio.
Let me just add to this, folks. I was listening to the radio at that time, and I have to tell you that I would hear these reports, and I would hear Curtis on the. I was a very young man. I was a teenager, and I would hear these reports of Curtis Sliwa on the radio, and he was constantly going after John Gotti. And this went on for many years, even to going after his son when you had an intern named Frank Morano and Babita Hariani. I remember that, too. And that was some really good radio that you were doing. And it was it eventually got back to them, no?
Well, nobody talked about organized crime. Nobody. Because I was warned by our colleagues in radio, hey, if you talk about the Gottis and the Gambinos, you'll be dead. Well, obviously, I didn't listen too closely. They tried to kill me. They didn't succeed. But it's absolutely the reason that everybody else took the code of omerta. And what I was talking about was their business of murder, extortion, racketeering, arson, and how they had a grip on the city. And I also busted the bubble of this notion, well, if you live in a community in which there's organized crime, whether the Bonanos at that time or the Colombos or the Lucchese's or the Genovese or the most powerful family, the Gambinos, you're actually going to be safer than if you lived in another neighborhood. And I would basically break that myth, and I'd say, look, I grew up in one of those neighborhoods. That couldn't be more hopelessly wrong. And I would critique how they would prey on hardworking Italian-American people, steal their savings, steal their businesses, extort, burn businesses for insurance money. And I obviously was making headway. So much so that John Gotti Sr. said after the baseball bat attack in April of 1992 did not silence me, he had another meeting with his son, John Gotti Jr., and he said, son, by all means necessary, if you got to cap this guy, if somebody's got to take him out, you arrange it, because this time I don't want him talking about our family, this thing of ours, organized crime. I want him dead. I want him muerte. And naturally, the son, John Gotti Jr., said, yeah, you got it, Dad. I got it. I'll take care of it.
Folks, we're on with Curtis Sliwa telling us about what happened to him on Juneteenth back in 1992. And we're going to get to the famous mob hit on Curtis Sliwa for doing the right thing on the streets for the city of New York. Don't go anywhere. It's Rich Valdez, America at Night. The phone number, 833-482-5337. Our guest, Curtis Sliwa, founder of the Guardian Angels. Coming right back. This is a hit coming from Godfather at the time, John Gotti Sr., and to his son, John Gotti Jr., the both of which were the butt of many jokes by Curtis Sliwa and, of course, criticized on a regular basis on talk radio in New York City. So I want to ask Curtis Sliwa to continue telling us this story, because it was Juneteenth back in 1992 when all this went down. Curtis Sliwa.
Yeah, what triggered it was, Rich, the fact that I had told the story of a murder that John Gotti Jr. had committed with all the details at a place called the Silver Fox Bar and Disco in South Ozone Park, Queens. Now, murder is an open investigation.
Right,
It
no
never goes
statute of
away. There's
limitations.
no statute of limitations. So the father, John Gotti Sr., hears about it, gets in touch with his son and says, "You're going to have a murder rap over your head unless you whack Sliwa. I don't care. Make sure this guy never talks again, because if he talks to the feds, they're going to be indicting you for this whole murder of yours." And then they set up a plan, and the plan was they knew how I got to work. I'd take a cab in the early morning to do show prep to prepare for the program. So they laid in wait. They had stolen a yellow New York City cab the night before. They brought it to a top shop, and they had turned it into a moving coffin by removing the handles inside of the cab and then putting them back with crazy glue. They knew I would get into that cab, and then they would then try to blast me into the hereafter, bleed me out in the cab, push me out, get rid of the gun on their way back to Brooklyn, in which both of these guys would have been paid mightily for having whacked Curtis Sliwa. The gunman, his name was Michael Leonardi. He had already killed 6 people. He was a professional hitman for the Gambino crime family. The driver, his name was Joey D'Angelo. He pretended to be a cab driver, couldn't have done a better job. He should have gotten an Academy Award. And before you know it, instead of going to the radio station, they were driving me in the direction where they were going to dump me out after I bled out. I got shot with 5 hollow point bullets. Luckily, I was able to jump through an open window in the back of the cab. I became a speed bump on the ground. Luckily, they were able to scrape me up, put me into a meat wagon, take me to Bellevue Hospital, and then put me all back together again like Humpty Dumpty, who took a great fall.
All right. Now, Curtis Sliwa, hold on a second. That was a lot of info, and it came really fast. So your regular day, you get out, you leave your house, and you're like, all right, I'm going to take a cab over to Madison Square Garden, which is where the radio station was, 17 floors above Madison Square Garden. And you decide, okay, I'm going to take this cab. You jump in the cab, and you tell him, hey, go this way, go that way. And what, does he ignore you?
No. In fact, they were going round and round the block since they had already scoped me out and knew that I would catch a cab. They had been doing this for 14 days, and each and every time I had gotten another cab. So they would come back each and every other day, hoping that one morning I would flag their cab. And on the morning of June 19th, 1992, they hit Powerball Lotto. I got into the back of that cab, and the gunman, who was stashed underneath the dashboard, Michael Leonardi, came up shooting. First shot missed my head, went through the back window. The next 5 shots, hollow point bullets, air raided my lower extremities, and the cab was moving at a furious rate. And
so hold on. You've got a guy driving the cab, and then another guy that was squatting, crouched down in the front seat, that at the right time, he comes up and he just starts shooting you in the back seat.
That is correct, and it was a perfect plan, except I didn't bleed out as they had hoped. I was able to jump out of the cab, out of an open window, and I took my chances that way. I knew if I had stayed in the cab, I'm dead on arrival. There's no doubt about it. So I took chances by diving out into incoming traffic through an open window, and luckily no cars hit me, but I was sucking concrete until they scraped me up off the asphalt, put me in the meat wagon, took me to Bellevue Hospital, and operated on me for 12 hours, and then put me in ICU where I had tubes in every orifice of my body to keep me alive.
Wow. Now, what happened? Did the gun jam? Did he run out of bullets? Did he have a 6-shooter? 5 slugs went into you. How did you find the opportunity to try to get to the window with a guy shooting at you?
Well, he had a .38, and obviously because he missed the first shot because he was trying to shoot me in the head, that gave me just, so few seconds to plot my escape. And what he had done was he had left a window open in the front because they had no air conditioning, and it was a sweltering hot day. In fact, as it is this time of year, 32 years ago. And I was able to take advantage of that. After he fired away furiously, he probably just assumed I wouldn't be able to move. And then like a cat with 9 lives, I used 8 of them right there, sprung for the window, made it out the window. As they sped away, And then the next thing you know, the police were there, an ambulance was there, and I was under the knife for 12 hours.
So you hit the ground, and is it Good Samaritans? Do you use your guardian angel walkie-talkie? How do people discover you?
Actually, it was right outside of a biker bar, a bar that was frequented by the Hells Angels. So they had heard the commotion outside, the many fired shots. They ran outside. They turned me over in the street. They said, "Hey, Curtis, don't die on us," as I was bleeding out. Boy, that was reassuring. And then clearly one of them must have been the ones to call the cops. Remember, there were no cell phones back then, and none of the pay phones were working because almost all of them in the Lower East Side of Manhattan, the alphabet jungle, had been broken into. So they had to do it from a phone inside the bar. And that's what got the police there. If not for the Hells Angels turning me over and seeing how badly I was injured from the bullets, I probably wouldn't have had anybody respond to me in time. I might well have either been a vegetable or gone straight to hell without an asbestos suit.
Without the asbestos suit. Folks, we're going to come right back, and we're going to hear the culmination of the recovery story of how Curtis Sliwa gets shot 5 times with hollow point bullets in close range in the back of a rigged taxi cab by the mob, and is here to tell the story today. Juneteenth, 1992, Curtis Sliwa, Rich Valdez, coming right back.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. This is America. This is Night. This is Rich Valdez.
Well, the hunt is on tonight. Mayor Dinkins is pledging his help to find the gunman who ambushed and shot Curtis Sliwa. The Guardian Angels founder and leader is recovering from surgery at Bellevue Hospital tonight. And McGee Hickey is there now with a live report for us. McGee?
Chuck, Curtis Sliwa is still in critical condition at this hour after undergoing more than 6 hours of surgery to remove 5 bullets. He's expected to recover fully from his injuries in a shooting that took place this morning at exactly the same place where he'd been attacked by 3 men with baseball bats 2 months earlier.
See, to me, I don't know why I should do it to him, because he's a great man.
Tonight, Guardian Angels patrolled the Tompkins Square Park area as they wondered who was gunning for their founder early this morning. It happened just after 5 a.m. near this newsstand at 7th Street and Avenue A. Curtis Sliwa told police he had just gotten into this cab to head to his morning radio show when he was shot 5 times in the thigh and lower abdomen by someone he said was crouching in the front seat.
He jumped out the window to get away. He's got the scrapes and bruises on the side of his leg.
Had this bullet gone, I would say approximately 1 inch higher, he might have been paralyzed for life.
They're out to get him. He was set up. This is not the first time he's been put upon. Several weeks ago, he was attacked by fellows wielding bats.
Later, police determined the cab had been stolen the day before. Police say Sliwa's 2 white assailants switched into a white town car a few blocks from the shooting.
I admire Curtis Sliwa, and I think that he takes his life into his own hands doing what he does.
I just hope everything works out for him and that his work continues, because it's not an easy thing he does, and the city needs more people involved and people doing things.
And with me now is Lisa Sliwa, who just within the half hour spoke to her husband. What is he telling you he heard them say before the shooting took place, or as the shooting took place?
All we know is they said "son of a bitch" right when they were shooting him, and that was it. And then he was struggling with a guy in the front seat and jumped out the window of the passenger side, wrestling with the shooter to get away from him.
Did he get a good look at them?
That we don't know yet.
Does he have any theories? Do you have any theories who could do this?
It could be anybody. Could be any number of enemies that we've made over the years in crime fighting, but we're not going to give up.
But do you have any ideas? I mean, who do you think it might be?
I don't have any particular idea. Right now, I'm just still concerned about his condition and hoping that he recovers. The guys are out on the streets looking for all the information that they can possibly get to turn over to the police. I hope we get these guys this time, and I hope the shooting stops in the city.
Okay, and he's going to be in intensive care for the next 2 weeks, and then he's expected to be released from Bellevue. We do have a hotline number that's been set up by the police for any information. That number is 212-598-0071. Reporting live from Bellevue, McGee Hickey, News 4. Back to you, Chuck.
That is the NBC affiliate in New York City back again, June 19th, 1992, after the first surgery was completed. And part of it there, when you hear the one gentleman that says a couple of inches higher and he'd be paralyzed, that was the doctor giving the press conference outside of the hospital. And when you heard another gentleman that was talking about he had been attacked a couple of weeks earlier, that was the mayor of New York City at the time, David Dinkins. I want to welcome back Curtis Sliwa, founder of the Guardian Angels, survivor of this attack, got shot 5 times at hollow point bullets. Curtis Sliwa, when you hear that story, does it bring back good, bad, or other types of memories?
Well, it reminds me how bad this city was, how out of control it was for average people. And obviously it almost led to my demise. And now we're starting to get the same way. The way it is in major urban areas around America. We had gotten so much better. Rudy Giuliani was elected after I was recovering. He straightened out the city. We had 20 years of improvement, and then 2 mayors back-to-back, belly-to-belly, de Blasio and Adams, and we're almost back to where we were on June 19th in 1992. That's why I'm doing everything I can with the Guardian Angels to prevent that, and planning on running again for mayor as I did the first time against Eric Adams when he beat me back in 1991. Wow.
Now, Curtis Sliwa, I know that you went to the hospital, and I think for a lot of people listening, they think, how is it that you're still okay? You're still in the streets. You're still fighting. I mean, during COVID, you were defending the Foot Locker from getting raided by the Black Lives Matter looters. And you got hit in the jaw with a hammer, and you're in your 60s, and older now. But that was back during COVID. And my question is, how do you keep it going?
Well, you take a lick and you come back ticking. I've had a lot of luck being able to survive a lot of trauma and a lot of potential situations that could have led to my demise also. Being shot, being stabbed, and such. But, when you're on a mission, you don't let anything come in between you and that mission. And I'm 70 years now, 70 years old.
Happy birthday.
Rich, I can take a licking, but I always come back ticking. As my wife Nancy says, you're like a cat who has 9 lives, and you're lucky because you've used 8 of them. You only got 1 more left.
Now, eventually, John Gotti Jr. was charged with the attempt on your life. Is that correct?
Yeah, 4 trials, 4 federal trials. The gunman, Michael Leonardi, did 20 years. The driver, Angelo, cooperated, told the story, and the jury obviously believed him. But John Gotti Jr. skated on a technicality because his attorney said, look, Curtis Sliwa didn't die. There's a statute of limitation. The feds didn't bring the trial soon enough. You can't touch John Gotti Jr. And 4 separate juries allowed him to escape going to jail, triple life without parole, for attempting to not only kidnap me, which he did, but to shoot me so many times that I would eventually be room temperature, a cadaver in formaldehyde.
Wow. Curtis Sliwa, I want to ask you to stick around for one more segment because I just want to get your reaction to a report that's out today on this rape that occurred in New York City of a 13-year-old girl. Horrible story. And as you were alluding to, New York is not what it used to be. Folks, keep it locked right here. We're coming right back with Curtis Sliwa.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. America at Night with Rich Valdez.
In court today, prosecutors revealed what 25-year-old Ecuadorian migrant Christian Inga told investigators after his arrest. Inga says he came across 2 13-year-old teens having sex in Casino Park last Thursday afternoon. He says he decided to join in. According to prosecutors, Inga told NYPD investigators that he tied both the boy and girl together with shoelaces, holding them at knife point, put a gag in their mouths, then took the knife and cut the girl's shorts and underwear off to begin raping her, all while filming the violent sexual attack on his cell phone. Once he finished his attack, Inga told the two teens to not move for 20 minutes while he ran away to, his words, buy more drugs. Inga was charged with predatory sexual assault, the highest sexual assault count someone can be charged with, along with rape in the first degree, kidnapping in the second degree, and a host of other charges.
Curtis Sliwa, our guest, I want you to give me your reaction to that, because that tidbit about admitting to videotaping the attack was something that I was not aware of until I saw this report. And I think this guy, I was mad at this guy yesterday. I think he's a sick bastard. I think I'm even more angry today.
Yep. It conjures up why we don't have a death penalty for people like this. First off, there was great street justice. The police did not catch this enemy of society. Once the video of his actual look was put out to the community, it was a group hanging outside of a bodega who knew that he came there every morning at 1 o'clock in the morning to get cigarettes and beer. They said, we're not calling the cops. We're going to set a trap. And the moment he showed up at 1 o'clock in the morning, they gave him the beatdown of his life. They hit him so hard his mother felt the vibrations, then tied him up with their belts, called the police, and then the next thing you know, he was being processed and charged with the most heinous crimes. But what you got to know, Rich, and your audience, 2 years ago, a judge ordered him to be deported. But because New York City and New York State is a sanctuary place, they do not work with ICE, Immigration and Naturalization Service, the cops, corrections, and the court system. And he was cut loose. And this we continue to do over and over all over this country. We move to deport them once they've committed a crime, but in sanctuary states and cities, there is no cooperation with ICE. If I had my way, I'd have every one of these elected officials locked up for refusing to work with a federal law enforcement agency started in the aftermath of 9/11 to keep us safe and secure from terrorism. It's an absolute outrage, Rich.
Yeah, you know, Curtis, and listen, I'm grateful for the community stepping up. I'm actually a little bit surprised that he was able to walk away when the cops came to get him. I would have thought they might have given him a little bit more of, as you say, wooden shampoo. But I'm grateful that this guy is behind bars, and I think we need more of that in New York City. You got to love people who do the right thing when they have a chance to do it.
That's right. And when there are not enough cops, we have to leave it to the people, and that's the state that we're in now. If government won't protect the people, then people have to go out there and protect people by whatever means they have available to them.
I hear that. Folks, check out Curtis Sliwa at curtissliwa.com. He's going to be announcing a run for mayor very soon, I hope, and we're looking forward to helping you as much as we can. Curtis Sliwa, you're a gentleman, a scholar, and a patriot. Thank you, sir.
My hands across America to the liberty-loving Latino.
Amen to that. Folks, we're coming right back. It's Rich Valdez.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. And there's a lot going on today, right? The U.S. Conducted a strike, and in this strike, we hit a couple of targets, one of them being a senior ISIS official in a strike in Syria. We'll be getting to that maybe a little bit later in more detail. We've also been discussing Juneteenth, especially from the perspective of my old friend Curtis Sliwa, who was shot 5 times by the mafia on Juneteenth 32 years ago. And there's also some complaining going on. Jane Fonda was on CNN yesterday, and she's not very happy with Joe Biden, but she's a lot less happy with Donald Trump. And she went on to say a number of things. And one of the things that she was complaining about was, if the Orange Man wins next November, it's going to be much worse for Palestinians. Listen to this.
But I understand the anguish of the protesters. I can't say that I know what he should do differently because I don't understand the situation well enough.
Jane Fonda, we always appreciate
all I know is if the,
go ahead.
Well, just one other thing. If the Orange Man wins next November, it's going to be much worse for Palestinians. I can say that.
Now, what's funny here is that she said, if the Orange Man wins next November, that means she thinks that the Orange Man can win. This is a big departure from where they were not that long ago, where, oh, Donald Trump will never, he's going to be taken out of the White House in handcuffs. Oh, the walls are closing in. Oh, he's going to be in a jail cell. Well, it seems like they're changing their tune a little bit. And that's interesting. So I base that on just some of the facts, some of the numbers that are out there, right? The Economist recently put out a survey. And listen to these chances, right? The odds they put out. It's a model that combined several state and national polls with economic indicators to predict election results across the country. And here is what they came up with. Donald Trump has about a 2 in 3 chance of winning 300 electoral votes of the 270 he needs to win. And Joe Biden has a 1 in 3 chance. They estimate him being at 238 electoral votes. Not enough to win. So, again, that's based on theeconomist.com. You can check it out there, their interactive U.S. election poll model, I should say. But that's where it is. And, again, this is because the left within the media, the left within our government, the left in our society, they're pushing and they're pushing and they're constantly pushing, right? The left within higher education, they oftentimes push as well. And they're always pushing for new ways of doing things in the medical field. And the University of Missouri has recently changed their tune a little bit, siding with merit. And they've now removed racial criteria when awarding scholarships and funds to current and future students. And this is a departure from where they have arrived most recently with the push for diversity, equity, and inclusion, and all these other things that, in my opinion, are politicizing medicine and the care that we as Americans expect when we go to medical institutions. But I want to get a little bit more in depth on this. And to do that, we've invited Dr. Jared Ross, Senior Fellow at the Do No Harm Foundation, and he's an assistant professor of clinical emergency medicine at the University of Missouri. He's also a board-certified physician. Dr. Jared Ross, welcome to the program.
Rich, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be on your show.
Thank you. Likewise, I'm happy to have this chat with you because, I think it's almost an anomaly to find folks from your organization. But for your organization, it's hard to find anybody in the medical field sticking up for the Hippocratic Oath and for the medical field, right? Because you go turn back the clock a couple of years and people were under fire by their board certification agencies saying, if you say anything about COVID, we might threaten to pull your credentials. And it was just such an ugly time. And I think we're past it somewhat, but there were a lot of things that were instituted to change the way we do things. And I think the way that they were awarding scholarships and other funds to future and current students was one of those things that changed. So, Dr. Ross, tell us a little bit about this.
Yeah, well, first I'll just give my University of Missouri caveat that my opinions are my own.
Sure.
But yes, I think this is a very important step in the right direction, and I think the work that Do No Harm is doing in this area is very impactful, moving back to merit, as you said. The Supreme Court case, Students for Fair Admission versus Harvard, which was announced actually in 10 days, will be a year exactly, was really a landmark decision. And that's what Mizzou, what we call it colloquially, the University of Missouri, says prompted these changes. It's about $13 million a year in scholarship money. And to bring this away from race and ethnicity and back to merit.
Now, what do you think sparked this change? Was it the people being up in arms? Was it parents, donors? What really brought the this sense of fairness and putting the focus on merit as opposed to where it had been with racial criteria?
Well, I think the university realized that with the Supreme Court decision last year that they had to change their admission process and admit based on merit. And they realized that it would be hypocritical to admit based on merit, but then award financial aid based on race and ethnicity. So to get everything in line and be internally consistent, they made this, I think, very brave and very correct decision to change how these scholarships are awarded.
Well, now, I don't disagree with you, but I will say, I don't know if that's enough sometimes, right? We have Harvard that recently, very soon after the Supreme Court decision on admissions and whatnot, can kind of double down saying we will continue. We're going to follow the rules and continue to do what we've been doing to make sure that we're admitting people based on, their socioeconomic status, their race and ethnicity and whatever, trying to reword it. So that they could remain in that place. It seems like Mizzou took a different approach, and kudos to them for doing so. But it seems like a lot of universities are either trying to spearhead this movement or they're just afraid and they're kind of succumbing to the pressure. What's your thought?
I agree with you, Rich. I think there's a lot of fear that universities are succumbing to the pressure. And there's universities like Harvard that are fighting this tooth and nail, that even with a very clear Supreme Court ruling, they're saying we're going to follow the rule, but we're going to find a way to circumvent it. And I know you mentioned socioeconomic status, and I think that's wonderful. I think college can be a wonderful way for people to move up in the world. I don't think it's for everyone. I think that we have a challenge in this country where we feel that college is mandatory to be successful, and it clearly isn't. We've got wonderful people like Mike Rowe promoting alternatives. But if you're choosing to go to college, I think taking into account someone's background, the fact that they might be the first person in their family to attend higher education is wonderful. But I think taking into account their race and ethnicity is really counter to our American values.
I agree with that 100%. And I also think it from a meritorious standpoint, or in a competitive standpoint, if you're trying to become a doctor, a physician, it's competitive, right? You have to get into a medical school. There's not a ton of medical schools. You want to be able to get in, so you have to have good grades. Most people want to be able to brag and say, I went to Dr. So-and-so, Dr. Ross. He's the best at X, Y, and Z. The best ER physician in America, Dr. Ross, right? People want that. And it's difficult. Yeah, amen. Right. And it's difficult to get to that status if it isn't a competitive status. And if we're going to give that status away to people based on, the fact that my dad and my mom were born in Puerto Rico, and now I get to be the best ER doctor, although I'm not, and not even on the radio I play one. But you get my point, is that it cheapens, I think, the level of care, and it endangers society. Is that hyperbolic, or do you think I'm onto something?
Oh, not at all. Not at all. I think there's a lot to be said for the dangers of DEI, of diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives in admission. But in healthcare, people's lives are on the line. And at the end of the day, we should care about what our doctors look like, what their skin color is. We should care about having the best doctor to take care of us. And so, no, it's absolutely critical in medicine, especially, that we are selecting people based on merit.
There's been a lot of discussion in Congress about putting forward resolutions that would ban diversity, equity, and inclusion programs in medical schools specifically. And there have been critics pushing back on that. So we're going to take a pause right here. But when we come back, I really want to get your thoughts on, I guess really a response to those critics that think that's the right thing to do. So, folks, don't go anywhere. We're continuing this discussion, a very important discussion, in my opinion, with Dr. Jared Ross, Senior Fellow at the Do No Harm Foundation, and he's also Assistant Professor of Clinical Emergency Medicine at the University of Missouri. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. The best guests, the best opinions. This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, familia, we continue our discussion on the effect of diversity, equity, and inclusion in medical schools. And this is a big deal. This is something that Congress has considered banning, and they've put forward different measures. And the proponents of DEI have fought back. The Center for Public Integrity, has made noise about this, as have other organizations, saying that this is horrible, right? And that DEI could help counter documented and widespread biases and racism contributing to disparate health outcomes for certain populations, including transgender patients, such as the person making the statement, someone named Montañez. And I'm reading this from the USA Today. Andrea Montañez, an Orlando area cardiologist, visited her cardiologist and was offended when her cardiologist, quote unquote, misgendered her, calling her sir. And this became a big deal. And because of this person's feelings being hurt, we have to entertain this idea that forces doctors, right, who deal with science and medicine, to make determinations they may not have learned in medical school, right? That this person identifies as something other than they actually are. So I want to unpack that a little bit because I think this is crazy, personally. And not because I don't want to acknowledge the gender of transgender individuals, but because I think that there is a place in science for what I consider to be the truth. And we have to have doctors that are going to be honest with us. So let's bring our guest back in. Our guest is Dr. Jared Ross, Senior Fellow at Do No Harm, and he's Assistant Professor of Clinical Emergency Medicine at the University of Missouri. He's a board-certified physician, and he's with us now. Dr. Ross, what do you say to people that are complaining that DEI is necessary to fix biases in medicine?
Well, what I say, Rich, is that DEI is just the new incarnation of affirmative action. And we see where 50 years of affirmative action has gotten the black population in the U.S., right? We have higher rates of poverty. We have much higher rates of single motherhood. We have a history in this country, a distant past history of racism, but countering racism with more racism does not fix that problem. And we're seeing that happen in South Africa right now. So yeah. I think it's wonderful to empower people and to judge people on their merits, and, tying back into financial aid to give aid to people who not just have merit, but show that they have financial need if they're qualified. But to judge people on their race just doesn't get anyone anywhere.
Yeah, I'm 100% on board with you there, and I think it's crazy that people would take the position that we need to include more people of a certain ethnic group. And the reason I think it's crazy, and I use the word crazy intentionally, is there could be instances of bias that are intentional. I don't think that there's plenty of them, but I'm assuming that they can occur. But I would say most of these, like when you look at some of the data that's out there, and I don't know how reliable some of this data is, that show that, African American women have these way worse, numbers, if you will, stats on their on maternal health outcomes. And I think there's a lot of factors that go into that, right? Like, their level of education, where they live, how they treat themselves, how they take care of their body, all of those things for prenatal care, which I think are real tangible things that can make a difference in the outcome. But it doesn't mean that there may not be some sort of bias that exists in certain neighborhoods and certain communities. But I don't believe that the fix to that is to say, well, no, we're not going to let Dr. Jared Ross, senior fellow at Do No Harm and assistant professor of clinical emergency medicine at Mizzou, we're not going to let him handle this because the guy teaches emergency medicine. We're going to get this other guy because he's also Hispanic, or he's also black, or he's also Asian, or whatever you want to go with. And to me, that doesn't really help the situation. It, in my opinion, it pours gasoline on it.
Yes, it absolutely does. And I think I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Dr. Marilyn Singleton, who was one of our senior fellows at Do No Harm. She unfortunately passed away yesterday.
Oh,
and
sorry.
She has been she's been a long-time advocate. Marilyn is black herself, is both a physician and an attorney, board-certified anesthesiologist, and she has been a huge proponent to say that no, everyone, especially those who are underserved by their socioeconomic status, deserve to have the best and most competent physicians and nurses and ancillary healthcare providers, not people who are selected based on the color of their skin, the melanin content in their skin, where their family's from. These are such arbitrary markers. And right. I know you had mentioned the research as well, and a lot of that research is very weak. A lot of it's survey data.
Well, we'll leave it there. Dr. Jared Ross, senior fellow at Do No Harm and professor at Mizzou, I want to thank you for being with us. You are a gentleman, a scholar, and a patriot, sir. Thank you.
Thanks so much for having me, Rich. Really appreciate it.
You bet. Godspeed to you. Folks, we're coming right back. We continue our discussions tonight. Your calls are coming up in open phones. Don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez.
He's brown, he's bald, and he's breaking it down. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez.
More allegations of sexual harassment among Louisville officers come to light.
An LMPD officer filed a lawsuit today against the city, and the police officer, Christine Silk, claims that her training instructor at the police academy, Dale Cottingham, made several inappropriate comments about making money for childcare. The lawsuit says that when she made a complaint, he was cleared of harassment but was reprimanded and transferred. Silk also claimed one of her field training officers, Justin Lamont, made repeated and unwanted sexual advances. And when she reported it, she claims no action was taken.
In a statement to WLKY, the department said it, quote, will not tolerate sexual misconduct. A spokesperson acknowledged the officers named in the lawsuit were both reassigned and that the allegations against Lamont are still being investigated.
That is a report from WLKY-TV in Louisville. And reports like this, that one's from today, but there are reports like this, or yesterday rather, reports like this all over the place. And there are increased incidences of people claiming to be shamed, ignored, experiencing office gossip, even being gaslit, which is a very popular term. Honestly, I don't think I've heard as much of the term gaslighting as I have in the last 5 years as I have in my whole life. And some human resource experts are saying that workplace incivility is on the rise. Now, I wanted to get to the bottom of this because from a different perspective, not from the perspective of the HR professional per se, but from the perspective of somebody you would go to if you were experiencing these problems. I think a lot of people might turn to their therapist, their psychotherapist, and say, hey, they're picking on me at work. And I'm curious to know if that's the case. And that's why I want to bring in Pamela Garber. She is from Grand Central Counseling Group, and she's also the creator of the Never Walk Alone safety app. We'll get to that in a little bit. But right now, I want to focus on this recent survey that finds that a majority of U.S. workers have witnessed some sort of uncivil behavior in the workplace. Pamela Garber, welcome back.
Hey, thanks, Rich.
You bet. So when you heard of this report, what's your initial reaction? Do you think it's fake, phony, and fraud? Does it make sense with what you're hearing in your practice from your clients?
Yeah, the name that comes to mind for me when people talk about situations like these is snipers, because these are sniper attacks. They're sniper attacks because people aren't out in the open with how they feel about the person who they're targeting. So instead of just being out in the open and acting like a grown-up, instead of that, it's this vague meanness, and it has other qualities to it as well. But the vagueness is there, and yet the person comes away feeling like they've been shamed, and it's hard to pinpoint exactly what's going on. Also, these snipers tend to be intermittent in their behavior, and so they're alternating with being kind and then being cruel, and alternating that for the purpose of confusing their target.
And now, is this because they're being malicious in their intention, or too afraid to have the difficult conversation, or maybe they just don't possess the skill set to have that conversation? What do you think?
So I'll give you a general answer. I mean, my first reaction is always that you can have 100 people do the same behavior for 100 different reasons. It could be all of what you said, depending on the circumstances, that someone might have a legitimate beef with another person and they decide to be passive aggressive, or they just fall into that pattern because it's a default pattern. They're more comfortable with it. That's a little better. It doesn't make it right, their behavior, but it's less contrived and strategic and manipulative. But a lot of what you're describing that's happening in a lot of these reports is this strategic, deliberate, intentionally shaming someone, intentionally tripping someone up. And, the reason for that typically is power and control, that someone wants to elevate himself or herself through putting someone else down. Instead of jumping through the hoops of elevating oneself, it's easier just to trip someone up. And there's another layer to this too, a third prong, which is that sometimes people take joy in tripping someone up, that there's an ego boost, especially the more confused the other person is, that it's not blatant, so the person may actually, there's still some sort of code of friendship, office friendship. That ambivalent quality is something that the perpetrator of this actually finds amusing, which then makes the whole thing appealing.
Give me an example of that.
Okay, so there's coworker A and coworker B. Mm-hmm. Coworker A is out for an ego boost. He or she is this coworker A is competitive and doesn't feel like he's getting the acknowledgement that he deserves. Coworker B comes in and is a shining star on a project and putting her heart and soul into it, working all these hours, etc. And coworker A starts to ask questions to B, and the questions at first seem kind. Coworker A says, I want to show you the ropes here. Be careful about talking to Susie Q. She's a little tense, and this is where we take our breaks, whatever. And then coworker A says, I don't know, you sure you want to say that? No. I was just asking. I think everything's fine. Oh, I didn't know that you were going to go with that. Okay, and something like that, and coworker
Right.
B can say, well, what do you mean? Oh, no, don't worry, it's nothing. And then there's a whole other thing too, the office gossip. Coworker A can recruit others into taking credit for coworker B's work, that kind of thing. But there'll be some sort of fluctuating niceness to coworker B, just enough to keep coworker B confused. A was nice to me. A just invited me out to the happy hour. But why do I feel nervous when I'm around A? Why am I doubting myself all of a sudden?
This is fascinating. I want to take a pause here and then ask a couple of follow-up questions, because I think we've all dealt with this, whether we're coworker A or coworker B. I think many of us have been in these situations before, and the reality is it's not exclusive to the workplace. I think these scenarios actually exist in a lot of dynamics. Folks, we're on with Pamela Garber. She's a psychotherapist and from Grand Central Counseling Group in New York City. She's the creator of the Never Walk Alone safety app, which we're going to get into in a subsequent segment. And we're coming right back. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
I want to listen to you, Rich, all the time.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, familia, welcome back. We continue our conversation with Pamela Garber. She's a psychotherapist with Grand Central Counseling Group in New York City. And the scenario that was posed before the break was that of coworker A and coworker B. And one of them being, let's say, the new person, kind of being shown the ropes around the office, where people initially come off as helpful and nice, and then they kind of switch up on you to try to almost ridicule you in certain ways and make you feel uneasy about yourself, unsure of yourself. And I've always considered people like this to be jerks, snakes, not the kind of person you want to get to know. But I'm sure there's a more clinical name for these people and describing these behaviors. So I want to bring it back to Pamela Garber to help me understand, why do people behave this way? What causes this behavior?
Interesting question. Well, okay, so that's back to that you can have 100 people doing the same behavior for 100 different reasons, 100 different explanations. If we go the clinical route, which doesn't always apply for this, but if it's the clinical route, so there's various personality disorders, and the words of the personality disorders are thrown around so much. You hear narcissism thrown around that it loses its clinical kind of weight. Yeah, its weight to it. But the bottom line, whether it's a clinical diagnosis where someone would meet criteria for a personality disorder, say narcissism, which a key feature of a narcissistic personality disorder is getting a return on investment for putting others down. There's a joy in that, and that's certainly in and of itself not enough to say, okay, well, narcissism is the reason for this. I think the overarching reason for all of it is that there's a return on investment. There's an ROI. The people who are being mean and continuing to be mean are getting a return on their investment of doing that. They're getting something out of it, and so it's continuing.
And I guess the something is the questionable part of it. Let me maybe rephrase the question and say, what if you're not a narcissist, if you're a regular person, and I don't know if there's such a thing as a regular person, but if you're not a narcissist and you either observe this behavior or observe it in yourself, this passive-aggressive response to certain scenarios, what causes that? Is that something that you inherit because your parents were passive-aggressive, or is there more to the story?
Right. Okay. So I'll give you two examples of what a cause could be. We could have someone who's typically a nice person who would never trip others up and never engage in that kind of behavior. And all of a sudden there is a spouse who is gambling or coming home late or being unfaithful, and then a bunch of other things happen. And the person just has this innate meanness all of a sudden, and it's not them. Or there could even be a combination of things, something medical and other things, and the person just all of a sudden has this mean quality and isn't able to, or just chooses not to get a rein on themselves, and they take pot shots at someone else because they're distressed, and the person could be in utter distress. Or what you were saying, the second part, which is more common, is that it's like a culture. Someone's raised that way. It's like a culture unto itself. And usually, the first example I gave, where you could maybe give someone a pass and someone might snap out of it and say, hey, I haven't been myself. I don't know what has, I don't know what's gotten into me, and I've been out of line. That's more rare, especially someone like that wouldn't be mean to this degree. So the other is that someone has this culture, they're from this culture where they feel good about putting someone else down, and they repeat this pattern. It was modeled for them most likely in their home.
Right. And we do see that, I think, growing up. And Pamela, of course, I'm interviewing you, but I want to share a few things. Right now, I'm going to kick my feet up on the leather couch that's here, and you're going to listen to me for a second. Because I went to my niece's graduation today. And I got to tell you, I went from annoyed to angered while I was there because of how inconsiderate people are. And I guess, every now and again we realize, wow, what a jerk that person is. But you kind of move on. You're like, oh, well, whatever. But I felt like I was surrounded by 1,000 inconsiderate people that just, from everything. Maybe it was just my mood going into this. But I went there pretty okay, I think. And the next thing you know, right behind me, there is a lady with a kid that's uncontrollable. This is an outdoor event. I had kids. My kids made noise, let's say, in church. And I would take my kids outside of, so that they just soothe them and then bring them back when it was appropriate. I don't think there's a sin in having a kid in a public place. I do think that there's something wrong if you let your kid, make all the noise in the world and you don't remove them from the situation. Take your kid 50 feet away and calm them down. Then the mom decides to turn on a tablet at full volume with hundreds of people around her. It was just the inconsiderate behavior was just abounding. She would get tired, toss him over to the dad. He would throw a tantrum with the dad, kicking the people in front of him. And then they decide to be the nicest people on the planet. And they turn around smiling. Oh, he's so cute. What's so cute about a 3-year-old kicking you? Nothing, right? And screaming about it. Now, that was one scenario. Then you had so many other distractions that were going on. And all I could think was, my kids already graduated. Last year was my last one for high school. But I can say that I felt like all these other parents that were there, and there was probably 1,000 people there at an outdoor graduation. These people are there for a moment in their life to watch their kid graduate. This is about the graduates. And I felt like the graduates were the ones getting slighted by these people. And lots of people were annoyed by what I was observing, but nobody wanted to make a scene, or turn around and give the evil eye or whatever it was. And I just think, are we trending towards a point in life, or maybe a cross section of our society is becoming just a very, very self-absorbed, lacking of empathy and consideration type of people? Is this something you're observing, or is it just me having a bad day?
Oh, no. Think of the airports. You just have to go to an airport or anywhere, supermarket, whatever the case. If manners was a stock, it's plummeting, right?
Yeah.
The stock would be on. Yeah. And it would be
What's
nice
up with
if there
that?
was a clinical explanation. Yeah.
There isn't.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think a clinical explanation, just like in the other with narcissism, a clinical explanation gives too much credence to horrible behavior that is, I think the horrible behavior is marketed and people buy the behavior. Why? Why do people want to act like this is your question?
Well, before you answer that, I like the way you set it up. Why do people behave that way? I'm going to take a pause right here. We're going to come back and we're going to answer. At least you're going to give us your thoughts on why people are behaving that way. Why are they taking the bait? Why are they buying this stuff? Don't go anywhere, folks. We're coming right back with Pamela Garber.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, amigos, welcome back. We continue our discussion with Pamela Garber on why people are behaving badly in the workplace and outside of the workplace in their interpersonal communications with one another. Pamela Garber, you were explaining why people are taking the bait on the bad behavior.
Right, so it's marketed. And I think that there's something along the lines of youth being marketed and this mean behavior. And it reminds me of the hoodie. Why are so many grown-ups wearing hoodies to work? Or, I mean, I have one also, but I mean, just nobody wants to be a grown-up and monitor their own emotions or their own behavior so they can put their feet up at the airport or wherever, or at the graduation.
Right. That's a very good point. I think we should have you back just to talk about the hoodie phenomena, right? And everything it encompasses. No, really. I think this prolonged adolescence and this lack of wanting to handle things as adults ought to is part of the issue. Maybe people don't realize how adults are supposed to handle things because it's been modeled that way through the media that you're talking about that's marketing these things. Pamela, let everyone know how they can find you and keep up to speed with the work that you're doing.
Oh, thank you. My website is grandcentralcounselinggroup.com, and my contact info is on that site and a bit about my practice.
And let everybody know, I wanted to get into this a little bit more, but I went over time here. Tell us where people can learn more about the Never Walk Alone safety app.
Thank you. So on the website, which is neverwalkalone.safetyapp.com, and
and they could sign up for it there.
I heard the music.
Never Walk Alone safety app. And again, this was in response to the surge in crime in New York City. Pamela, I promise we'll bring you back on because there was really a lot to discuss. It was a really good conversation. I appreciate you coming on the radio with us late night. Thank you, Pamela. Folks, we're coming right back. Open Phone America is coming up with me, Rich Valdez. Don't go anywhere.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to the program. It is the Wednesday night edition of the program. The phone lines are open, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. And we've been talking about a number of things tonight. We've talked about workplace behavior and why people behave the way they do, right? Why are some people passive-aggressive and narcissistic in their approach with other people? Why do we lack empathy and kindness? I don't know the answers to all of those, but I'm willing to hear all of your speculation on it. And, of course, we talked about my buddy Curtis Sliwa, one of my radio mentors, and how he was shot 5 times on Juneteenth 32 years ago today and survived to tell the story, as well as the conversation we had on diversity, equity, and inclusion being pushed by the Biden administration and the effect that that has on healthcare and other areas of our lives. So we're going to get to all of that, like I said, with your calls. I also want to give you a couple of quick headlines here. The the Boston Celtics have won the NBA championship. This is their 18th win, making history there. That's the extent of my sports reporting. Now, back to politics. Nancy Pelosi made a stock bet and earned 20 times her salary on a single stock bet. Isn't that something? I need a gig like that one. And listen, I'm grateful for the gig I have. Absolutely love being on the air with you guys. But just imagine being able to make 20 times your salary on one stock investment. Wow. I mean, I just think of all the impact that could make for my family, for others. It just sounds like a great thing. We're also going to get to some of the craziness that's going on with the Biden administration. The Federal Communications Commission has a majority of Democrats that are now trying to fast track the sale of certain radio stations or the purchase of debt and getting these radio stations moved over to the column for George Soros. So maybe we'll get into that a little bit as well. But I want to get to your phone calls because I love to hear from you. And there's a bunch of people on hold that want to get in on this. Let me see. Let's go to whoever was on hold the longest. That would be, where did it go? Let's see. Give me a second here, folks. Live radio, and sometimes my screen freezes. Connor, Eastern Shore, Delaware, WXDE. Connor, welcome. You're on with Rich Valdez. Go right ahead.
Hi, Rich. Can you hear me all right, or should I take you off speaker?
You sound fine.
Awesome. First, I want to thank you for taking my call. And second, I want to say that I agree with the notion that there is an increased amount of workplace hostility, I guess would be my word for it. Mm-hmm. And, passive aggressiveness. I listened to, I heard someone say like sniping almost of, certain, going after an individual, maybe not for any particular reason, but I definitely have seen that at my previous workplaces and especially my most recent workplace.
What was the reason, from your estimation, why was that happening? Why are people targeting other people in the workplace? I can tell. And this is really, I believe in the old saying, "Don't start none, and there won't be none." Right? I think I'm the nicest guy ever until you get into it with me. Once you get into it, then we might have bad blood after that. But for the most part, I don't go looking for trouble. But apparently, some people do, and they do it as sport.
See, I agree with that. I'm trained in martial arts, and I was taught you run before you fight, and you fight before you maim, and so on and so forth. And I can agree with you that I don't see myself looking for trouble, but maybe in the ways of myself and the multiple, like millions, billions of personalities out there. Maybe others see that like odd personalities as attacking or as aggressive. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think there is a lot of that. And our guest, psychotherapist Pamela Garber, her thought was that people are seeing this behavior either modeled at home, so maybe it comes from their upbringing. Others are seeing it modeled in what they consume, whether it's media or whatever. And I would agree with that too. I think when I was a kid, I'm not that old, right? I'm 46, but I grew up watching reruns of a show called Little House on the Prairie. And this show was very wholesome, very family values. This is literally my siblings and I with my parents. We sat around the living room watching this show, and we're all into it, knew all the characters. The discussion during the breaks was about the show. And And that's what we watched, and other like family sitcoms, which really changed, right? Just another example, Different Strokes, right? It was about the little two black brothers that were adopted by a rich white guy on the Upper East Side of New York City, played by I forget his name now, the actor who played Arnold. But anyway, Gary Coleman, thank you, it was at the tip of my tongue. But great show, and reiterated kindness and love and acceptance and family, and just that was what it was about. It was all about family. And you fast forward to today, and there's a lot of other family dynamics that are going on, mainly broken ones. And it seems to glorify divorce. It seems to glorify separation. It seems to glorify things that really don't have any positive outcome for people. And I think when we see this behavior, you see the rude, the mean girl, if you will, it seems to be appealing to some people, so they go ahead and they do that. I can't for the life of me figure out why people are as inconsiderate as they are, or as they're becoming. I can't for the life of me figure out why people don't care about other people as much. Yesterday, I'm scrolling through Instagram, and I know that there's been crime in bad neighborhoods since I was a kid. But I watched a Instagram video that had a guy arguing with a guy in front of him on like road rage. And it's a husband and wife that are recording from their car. And the guy gets out and he's huffing and puffing and he's shouting at the guy through the window. And the wife is like calling play-by-play here. And she's like, don't get out, don't get out. and the husband's like, he's like, man, if he gets out, it's about to go down. They're about to throw hands. It's really interesting, right? And somewhat entertaining. But at one point, the guy gets out. And he goes over to the other guy, and the guy goes right into his car and pulls out a gun. And now the wife is telling the husband, who's videotaping this from a third car, and she's like, put it away. If they see you, you're going to get hurt. He might shoot us and blah, blah, blah. The guy turns around. He's like, oh, you got a gun? All right. He does an about face. He doesn't want to fight anymore. He gets in his white pickup truck, and he's about to leave. The guy with the gun gets back in his car, slamming the door. He's very visibly angered. And he leaves, and he can't contain it. And he just starts shooting out the window at the car that's driving away. And I'm thinking, man, I've never seen this in real life. I know these things happen, but to me, I think they're happening more often than not. And that, to me, is problematic. I don't know if it's that we've gotten too far away from God. We've gotten too far away from caring about our fellow man, caring about life, humanity. We've trivialized, I think, people's lives to the point where it's like it's my way or the highway. If I get upset, be prepared to die. And I think that's a crazy way of thinking. And clearly you have to be brought up to think that way, because I don't think society generally operates that way, Connor.
No, and I've been listening to everything you said. I don't think I maybe caught everything, but the way that I was at least brought up, I was very privileged, as you could say nowadays, for lack of a better word. But, that means I'm lucky that I had great parents. I grew up in a great neighborhood. I got to fish. I got to play t-ball. I got to play soccer. I got to go to good schools. However, those good schools did have the bad eggs. And, I would sometimes try to hang around the bad eggs, especially when my friendships during middle school and high school started to decay a little bit. I couldn't tell you exactly why, but it seems to me that there is a massive culture shift. And I don't think it's as black and white as one culture has changed to the, looking for the right word here, but one culture has changed.
Keep it up with the times.
The other culture. Yeah. Or, there's multiple cultures out there, but it seems like the my way or the highway, etiquette versus the care about, love thy neighbor, culture. It seems like those are clashing and exchanging, positions. Right.
Yeah, fascinating point. And I don't know if it's one that we're going to answer, but I'm willing to take all of your calls on it, because I think this is a fundamental problem, way bigger than Trump or Biden, in my opinion. This is an issue of how we coexist as people and how our children treat each other on the playground. And if we don't have a fundamental agreement on kindness and respect for one another, we got a problem, Houston. Connor, great talking to you. I appreciate you calling into the show and listening to the show. Big shout out to everybody listening in Delaware on WXDE. We're going to continue with your calls and more straight ahead. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
Rich Valdez, who, again, will do a fine job, but I know you'll enjoy listening to him.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, we continue with your phone calls on all of the topics we talked about DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, why people behave badly in the workplace, as well as the political topics we discussed, and Curtis Sliwa, who was shot up on Juneteenth a million years ago. So we're going to get to your calls. We got calls from all over, by the way. The West Coast is in the building tonight. Shout out to Oregon, KUMA. We've got KSAR, Arkansas, Absecon, New Jersey, WOND, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, KDKA, WDEL, Delaware. What else? We got Cumberland, Maryland, WCBC. KBOI, that's Boise, Idaho, KOFI, Evergreen, Montana, and WILS, Lansing, Michigan. Let's go to Linda. Linda, welcome. You're on with Rich Valdez. Go right ahead.
Good evening, Rich.
Hi.
Well, I'm going to take us back in time. I started my college career at Michigan State back in 1973. And I transferred after a year at Central Michigan. I had a 4-point GPA with a Board of Trustees scholarship at Central.
Wow.
But at Michigan State, I wasn't able to get any financial aid or scholarship money. And I repeatedly went to the financial aid office and was told, you're the wrong color and the wrong sex. You're never going to get any money here. Quit wasting your time and our time.
Wow.
And back then, a woman couldn't even get a guaranteed student loan until her senior year because she was considered a poor credit risk. Long story short, I graduated in the top of my class. I was the top female, and the top 2 females and top 2 males were invited to the university president's office, and he was a black man. His name was Clifton Wharton. And he had a $200 check for each of us. And when he handed me mine, I said, no, thank you, too little, too late.
Wow.
And he said, I don't understand. And I said, it's more important to me that you hear my story than I receive your check. And I told him, I said, MSU did nothing to enable my academic success. I did this all on my own. And your people were bold enough to tell me that I was the wrong color and wrong sex. I would never get any money here. So I'm sharing this story with you so that you will consider enabling the academic success of all students.
Yeah, well, I think that's exactly what we should be doing, and that was kind of why we had the doctor on to talk about effectively the same topic, which is not discriminating based on one's color, whatever the color may be, right? Not forcing people of color into positions in the medical field or forcing people that are not of color out of positions or, preventing them from getting such positions or admission or whatever and what have you. To me, it has to be based on merit because ultimately people want what's best for them and for their health. And if, the best person for the job is, I'll tell you a story real quick. When I first became a dad, my little girl, we were very close, obviously, right? We never wanted to let go of our little baby. And when she was about 4 months old, she's 22 now. She'll be 23 next month. But when she was 4 months old, my cousin was getting married in Connecticut. And it was, hour-long ride or whatever. So we couldn't bring her, our 4-month-old baby to the wedding. So we had arranged to leave her with my mother-in-law at the time when I was still married. And we had dropped the baby off, I think, the night before, and she had her. So we woke up and we were headed out to this wedding. And I was fixing my tie in the mirror, and I hear my wife get the phone, and she's like, I don't understand what's going on. What are you saying? And she gives it to me. She's kind of annoyed, and she's like, I don't know, it's my mom. I can't understand a word she's saying. So I get the phone. I'm like, hello, and I could not understand her either. And she puts her husband on. So now I'm talking to her husband, and I'm like, hey, what's going on? And he's like, look, the baby fell, and we're waiting for an ambulance. And I was like, are you kidding me? It's about 8 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday morning, and I'm almost out the door to go to my cousin's wedding. So I was like, tell me more. And I hear him vomiting. And I'm thinking, why is this guy vomiting? He was so nervous about making this call. So I jump in my car with my wife, for the most part, like half dressed, and doing her makeup, whatever it was. And I drive down to this church. It was about 30 blocks away from where I lived. I get to this church, and as I'm getting there, the ambulance is pulling out. So now I don't even have time to stop and talk to her mom. I just chased the ambulance straight to the hospital. It was in Union City, New Jersey, and it went to a hospital in Hoboken. So we get to the hospital in Hoboken, and they're like, "Oh, this is an infant. We're not taking any chances. We're sending her for CAT scan to make sure that there's no head trauma because she did fall and hit her face and her head and split her nose open in two parts. Like one nostril was on one side of her face, the other nostril was on the other side of her face. Long story short, a surgeon walks in smelling like the night before, still wearing his party outfit, looking like Saturday Night Fever. And I was like, there's no way this is the plastic surgeon. It was. And I had a choice to make. And they said, this guy is the best there is. And sometimes we got to choose the best there is. It doesn't matter what their race is. When it's your kid, you want the best. And he did a fantastic job. Linda in Lansing, Michigan, thank you for the call. Shout out to WILS. Coming right back. Rich Valdez, don't go anywhere.
By the way, your ratings are up. Congratulations. I had somebody. It's always nice to check. I like to see, even if they're friends, I like to see how are they doing. Are people listening, right?
That's
but
right.
You're doing great.
America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, we continue with calls across America. And let me see, I just had somebody I was just looking at, and now I lost my place. Hold on. Don't go anywhere, folks. I appreciate your patience. We're getting to your calls momentarily. Where was it? Here we go. Joe, Salem, Arkansas, KSAR. Joe, go right ahead.
Rich, two or three things here. Number one, kudos to you and Curtis for having a good interview there. However, I've followed him for quite some time. I'm amazed he's still alive, walking around. Is he still not believing firearms like he used to?
It's not that he doesn't believe in firearms. It's just you can't really carry one in New York because it's never been legal up until like now with the decision that we had a couple of last year or whatever. So, yeah, the answer is the Safety Patrol group known as the Guardian Angels still is unarmed. I don't even think most of them, they don't even carry mace.
I tell you, for the business he's in and his colleagues, he should have a permit. He should be carrying something. That I didn't know about that 5-shot shooting. That's news to me, boy. That's amazing. A guardian angel must have been with him from up above on that situation.
Absolutely.
I didn't hear him say how many he had work in New York City. Do you know about how many angels there are?
They have a couple of different chapters in each borough. I mean, like a chapter in each borough. But it's not huge, honestly. When they get together, it's usually about 15 or 30 guys that go on patrol, and they rotate at different sites throughout the city. I've every year for the Puerto Rican parade that they usually march, and I march with them. And it's a larger group. I'd say maybe about 40 or 50 that come out for that. But yeah, it's not a huge group. But most of the ones I've met, almost every single one of them is either training to become a black belt or a black belt in one of the martial arts.
Well, I'll tell you, that's awful good and brave of them to put themselves out there like that. However, down here in Arkansas, we all pack all the time. I mean, you never know when you're going to run up on somebody else getting some trouble, and you're going to have to do something about it.
Yeah.
Packing a big one has delivered me from evil 3 times when I probably would have been dead. All I had to do was brandish it, and then the dope heads got back in their car and left quietly then. They were going to cause me some harm.
I bet they were. Well, thank God for the Second Amendment. Joe in Salem, Arkansas, I appreciate the call. Let us continue. I want to go to, let's see, where do we go here? Who was next in line? We've got Doc, Wilmington, Delaware, WDEL. Doc, go right ahead.
Yes, Rich. Thanks for taking my call, and thanks for a great show as always.
Thank you.
I have to comment on Joe's call about the Second Amendment. I'll make a prediction to you. This comes from a very, very prominent lawyer here in Delaware who argued a very prominent Second Amendment case for the appellate courts, and they ruled in our favor here in Delaware. He and the head of our local sports association, our affiliate in Delaware, are telling me that the court is going to throw out by the fall of 2025 all restrictive Second Amendment laws across the nation. Mm-hmm. I have and I have a person who is a long-term acquaintance of mine, a professor of law that taught me constitutional law at the University of Delaware, and she is stating that the court's going to throw out affirmative action definitely by 2025.
You know, it makes all the sense in the world to me, because the opinion that came down, and I forget the name of that case, the Braun decision, that one pretty much nailed it. And the opinion was very clear, right? What Clarence Thomas wrote was, you know, again, anything that's restrictive on it has to stop. They're going to play, the lawfare now and go after it and try and tie things up. But eventually, I think it's just going to be what it's intended to be. And I have every belief in the world that that'll happen, and hopefully it'll happen sooner rather than later. So I think you're right on that. As far as the other thing with affirmative action, I think that will, again, they might toss out certain cases, but I believe that's something that won't be as concrete. And again, we just saw what happened with college admissions. I think there's always going to be an effort to try things, and there's going to be an effort to try things with various states as well with the Second Amendment stuff. But I feel that because this is such a hot button topic, they're going to do I'm going to say a better job at clarifying and defining the scope of it. Whereas with affirmative action, there's always going to be, I think, just many more ways to skin a cat because you don't have something like the Second Amendment to refer to, right? So because you can intentionally make it broad, even if it doesn't work out in the long term, in the short term, you can make it broad. Be like, well, I didn't know. You said you couldn't do this, but it doesn't mean I can't do that. Whereas the Second Amendment, you're kind of you're confined, right? You're confined to what it actually says in the Second Amendment. So I think that's how that ends up. But Doc, I think you're spot on with that one. I appreciate it. It's been a while since we've heard from you, so thank you for the call. Thanks for tuning into the show. Big shout out to WDEL and our buddy Doc in Wilmington. Joe Biden's neighbor, by the way. And let's continue. Let's go to Absecon, New Jersey, WOND. Check in with Greg. Greg, go right ahead. You're on with Rich Valdez. Welcome.
Mr. Valdez, good evening. Or good morning. Sorry.
Yes. Buenas noches. Buenos días.
Thank you. The crime that's being committed by the visitors, I'm going to call them, These people are predators. They should not be put into our jail system. They should not go into our judging. They should go to Gitmo. And the countries that have supplied them should pay for it. And if they're not willing to pay for it, then all aid that they receive ceases. And the aid that should have gone to them will now take care of the prisoners. And what should happen, these people should be put in shackles and chains and not sent home.
Well, you know, Greg, first I want to say a big shout out to WOND, great radio station, and in the area of Absecon, Atlantic City, that whole area. And I want to just say I agree with you, right? I think that it would be awesome if we could all remember a time, right? I'm old enough to remember a time where we had a president, a guy named Donaldus Magnus El Trompito, and he turned to Mexico and he said, you know, we're going to label you a narco-terrorist state, and we're going to come after you with the force and power of the United States military if we don't get your cooperation on immigration. And guess what they did? Very quickly, they changed their tune and they enacted the Migrant Protection Protocols, the MPP, also known as the Remain in Mexico policy. And voila, that slowed down things to a trickle at the border. Why? Because we had a leader that was willing to roll up his sleeves and get dirty. But if you're not willing to get your hands dirty, it's not going to happen. And yes, we've got people that are being rejected and ejected from their own home countries. People that are predators, people that are rapists, people that are murderers, that are on the loose in our country, and then they commit crime and they're let loose by the legal system in New York, which has been neutered. The police in New York City have been neutered, so they can't be effective. And then they're out there hurting people in other places. It's an absolute shame. It should never happen. And I agree with you. We should start sending a bill to these people. And maybe we had a better president than Joe Biden, maybe some of those things would happen. Greg in Absecon, New Jersey, WOND, thank you for the call. Folks, we get to the rest of your calls and more straight ahead. Don't move a muscle.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Voted best head of hair in live late night radio 6 years in a row. It's Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. And we continue with your calls and comments on everything that's going on this evening. I want to, let's go to, let me see, where do I want to go? Who was next in my list? You would think I would figure this out during the break, but we're going to get to you right now. Let's go to Jim, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, KDKA. Quickly, go right ahead.
Great job, Rich. Look, I'm 72, okay? I started University of Pittsburgh in 1970. I was going to be a lawyer. I didn't like how all lawyers were going to jail. So I became a pharmaceutical salesman, trauma and burn specialist. You mentioned plastic surgeons. They have an ego a mile wide. But if I want someone to cut me, I want someone, if he's arrogant, at least be able to cut me right. Surgery-wise. Now, we were that good, our company, that we sold products that people died or lived if we weren't there. I'm talking burn units. You die of sepsis. We had 2 products. We told them what we would go in. We would go in and we'd say, Doc, use this, use this.
And did you have to deal with narcissists while you were doing that?
Yeah, all the time. I'll give you an example. One guy, and they were doing what to drive. They were archaic treatments and stuff, and they were doing 30 years. And they were seeing a lot of wounds in nursing home. So the nurse said, he's an a-hole, go see him. So I go see him, and I'll never forget this as long as I live. He goes, what do you got, son? He goes, we've been doing this for 30 years, since I was in surgery. They get they're in residency, they develop a bad habit. So I said, all right, I'm going to leave right now. I said, I guess nothing's happened in 30 years. You know it all, right? I start walking out. He goes, oh, wait a minute. It's like a little kid with candy, And I said, you want to listen? He goes, all right. I go, what do you do after you breathe the wound? What to dry? I go, you know they're painful, aren't you? No, they're not. Do you have one pull off on you, buddy? I shut him down real quick. I did his calcium algae just on him. He goes, leave me.
Sometimes you got to take that approach with people and shut them down, because otherwise they'll just keep trying to bully you. And it's a sad thing, but that's kind of where we are. And I think it also depends on, some people handle things better than others when it comes to certain behavior. Some people think it's aggressive, others may not. But Jim, thank you for the call in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, KDKA, America's oldest radio station. Let's quickly pivot to the center of the country, a little bit northern. Frank, Evergreen, Montana, KOFI. Go right ahead.
Ditto to you this evening. And it's,
Thank you.
A great subject here on the origins of words, and especially third grade level policing of students by soccer moms or whatever. They're just it's sad, But when my daughter was in the third grade, they were using words like ditto, cabbage head, and my gosh.
And you're saying that was aggressive back then, but today you have people that are, really actually treating people pretty poorly.
Oh, yes. And then Harry Potter came around, and then there was a Latin phrase of a spell which would make a person's head disappear, of a bully disappear. And he was basically saying ditto, pumpkin head in Latin, and then the head would appear in a pumpkin patch.
It's funny that was once mean, right? And that's what bullying was, and now we are where we are today. Frank, it's tough to see this progression from ditto pumpkinhead to where we are today with people shooting each other during road rage. But Frank, thank you for the call, my brother. I got to keep it moving here to make sure we have space for Andy in Washington, PA on KDKA right before we go to our break. Andy, go right ahead. Andy going once. Andy going twice. Looks like the cat got your tongue. Maybe it's a ditto pumpkin head for Andy, and they made him disappear with the Harry Potter spell. Folks, we're coming right back to the rest of your calls. Cumberland, Maryland, Boise, Idaho, Pendleton, Oregon, KUMA. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
So glad to be on your show, Rich. It's just an amazing broadcast that I hope the rest of America listens to every day.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, folks, it's the speed round, so use as few words as possible and make it snappy. Frank, Cumberland, Maryland, WCBC. Go right ahead, sir.
In your first segment, Dr. Jonathan Ross said taking account of race and ethnicity is contrary to American values. I think he got it wrong, and I think Lyndon and Lansing, Michigan got it wrong, and so did you. You're missing the point. The first American value was freedom, and the government is dictating what private enterprise can do, and that's wrong. It's communism. We don't tell farmers how much food to grow, and we wouldn't tell Harvard University how to run the business. And if people don't like it, they can start their own college.
Yeah, well, listen, I agree with that in so much as it's the government actually dictating. But I think for a long time what we've seen, it wasn't the government dictating. It was these institutions that wanted to dictate and then getting the support of the government on the back end. So, yeah, I still agree with the point that the government shouldn't be involved. If anything, the government should take the opposite position and say, we're not going to get involved in interjecting race into certain positions of professionalism, whether it be medical professionals or et cetera. But I agree with your point, and well taken. Frank, Cumberland, Maryland, WCBC. Michael, Pendleton, Oregon, KUMA. Go right ahead.
Rich, great talking to you. Great show as usual.
Thank you.
You and Billy Cunningham have had some great shows recently. I'll just stick to one topic tonight, Rich. The debates coming up, do you feel, depending how well President Biden does, that'll be a determining factor if he actually runs, or someone else may be the nominee instead of him for the Democrats?
Well, I think that can go either way, honestly. I believe that there's a lot of people hoping Biden will bomb in the debate, which there's going to be sections where he bombs, and there's going to be at least one or two shots that I always say he's going to land a shot or two on Trump so that the media can play those on loop to defend him, unless his own party has called into their friends in the media and said, listen, I don't care what this guy does. Make sure he looks like a loser. We got to get rid of him and pressure him to get out of this so that they can try to salvage this thing. The thing is, I think I have more faith in Biden than they do. I'm looking at a poll today where, and again, maybe a shoddy poll, but people aren't as hot on the economy as they were, meaning angry hot, right? People are thinking, oh, it's not as bad as it was. They're still angry about immigration, and it's only June. You got July, you got August, you got September, October. He's got a couple of months to try and continue to swing those numbers where he will be a little bit better positioned. Post-debate, I think he's got to get a little bit of a bump because that's just how debates work, especially if you're the incumbent. He's going to have a few applause lines or what he's going to build into his presentation as applause lines. So I think we can expect that Biden will get a little bit of a bump. Do I think it's enough to take on the massive amount of Americans that don't want him and want Trump back? No, I don't think it's enough. But I don't think it's a foregone conclusion either that Trump is the hands-down winner. I think this is an election that we have to fight for, and we can't take anything for granted. Michael in Pendleton, Oregon, KUMA, thank you so much. Let's see. Paul, Boise, Idaho, KBOI. Paul, go right ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Rich. One thing about Pelosi, you could have the SEC look in on the deal that she made for those millions of dollars. And I think what you'd find is some insider trading, but it's not going to be looked into. They're looking the other way, just like they looked at the Capitol and they looked the other way when she turned down Trump's offer for the National Guard.
Yeah, you know what's interesting, Paul? The folks in Congress have this protection where they're allowed to do insider trading and they don't get in trouble, and the rest of us do. And that's something that I think should have never happened, and it shouldn't be the case. But it's clearly written into the rules, I guess, so that in addition to the 154,174 that they make a year, they can also make a killing on stocks. And Pelosi seems to be just a great stock picker. That's why she does so phenomenally well. Wink, wink, nod, nod. Folks, thank you, Paul, by the way. Hasta la próxima. Take care. Good night, and God bless you, America. I'll be back tomorrow if God lets me do it. Until then, keep it locked right here. There's more programming to come right after this. I'm Rich Valdez.